Welcome back to Redirecting. I am going to be talking about two movements that have infiltrated the Black community in such a strong way that we've actually gone above and beyond. In some cases, we've gone above and beyond what the originators of these movements have gone. And I'm talking about the MGT0W movement, which is men going their own way, and the feminism movement. Okay, now it is my belief that the MGT0W movement have actually gone above and beyond what the originators of this movement have gone. Not so much with the feminism, and I'm going to explain why, although I do believe that feminism exists in the Black community. And the version of feminism that I'm referring to is not the Harriet Tubman type feminism, but this ignorant modern day movement. Okay. Many considered Harriet Tubman to be a feminist, but she was a woman who was very independent and helpful to her community. She was a woman who felt like to be a woman didn't mean that you have to cower down with no strength to stand. Okay. So that type of feminism that most people considered Harriet Tubman was not a bad feminism. But what we see today is, like I said, this very ignorant movement of women who believe that they don't need a man. They don't want a man telling them anything to do. They want to be, like the commercial that they have in the song, anything you can do, I can do better type thing. That is a modern day feminism movement. And when you look at the actual definition of feminism, I wouldn't even call it feminism, what you see going on today. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to leave it right there. That is what people believe feminism is. So that's where we're going to leave it for the sake of this video. But both movements have infiltrated the so-called Black community. The feminism and the men going their own way movement. But our men have taken it to the max. And our women have actually joined a false feminism movement because they are wanting to mirror what white women have done. And our men wanting to mirror what white men have done. So we don't know how to look within our communities and start or establish our own movements. And let me tell you what that movement should have been versus our men joining white men with the MGTOW movement, or Black women joining white women with the feminism movement. Our movement should have been to repair the breach within our own community. Because regardless to the movements these other racial groups have, they understand something very basic, that together they can continue to conquer the world, that they have to maintain white supremacy. Now, I'm not saying that we should seek after Black supremacy, but what we should seek after is to fortify our relationships. But we are doing the exact opposite. We are doing everything possible to destroy what we have left. There are even books out here written by Black professors telling Black women to stop thinking about Black men and move on. Now, this is a Black man telling Black women. Now, I don't know what his overall objective was in this. I don't know. I haven't read the book, but that could be, I would say, a negative and a positive. Now, if he meant something positive by it, he was basically saying, okay, I've looked at my brethren and I don't see that they are improving. And so instead of waiting on and trying to fix the Black man, move on and date other races. That could have been what he meant, although it's still not a good idea. He probably didn't have anything negative behind his push, okay? Or he was thinking that way, because for me, it's still negative. But if that is what he meant, then he felt like he was trying to help Black women. But essentially, he is hurting our people even further, because someone with his education should know better that in order to fortify or in order to improve us as a people, we have to fortify what remains versus trying to separate from one another, versus trying to get away from one another or going to other races. Because guess what? If we leave these other nations in droves, they're still going to maintain who they are. We are being used worldwide for something that these other races don't have. And I know those listeners that I have who are very pro-white or anti-black or whatever, or who look down on black people, won't understand what I mean, or they care not to understand what I mean when I say that these other nations come after something that we have that they don't. And what that is mixing their seed with our people. This is why worldwide this has taken place. You have Chinese men over in Africa right now seeking out African women to marry and have children with. Now, it's not because they're falling head over heels in love with these African women. It's not because they've deemed them to be so incredibly beautiful that they can't not live without them. What these people are doing is a power play. They're like, okay, if I can marry this woman who I really don't care about, who I can give to, a woman who I really don't have any feeling or emotions for. If I could just marry her and plant my seed in her, my seed will be born on African soil, and that will give us legal standing on the continent. So our people are being used over there, used to help these people to establish roots on the continent of Africa. Now, notice you don't see it the other way around. Not saying that it doesn't exist. There are some of our men on the continent who are marrying Asian women, but that's very small compared to the Asian men who are marrying African women. Because most of the time you won't have these women of other nations, or should I say Asian women, going over there to find some poor African man that she can bring all of her wealth with. She's not going to do that. It's the other way around with the men establishing themselves on the continent so that they can move about freely and do whatever it is they want to do, because their children that they just had with this African woman have just given them legal standing and citizenship there. Now, I'm not saying that the fathers themselves don't have to get some type of legal citizenship, but their children being established on the continent, even if that child leaves and goes back to China and is taught and educated on what needs to be done in Africa, they will raise that child up and send the child back to establish his roots. We have made it too easy for people to make suckers out of us because we join these movements and we decide to flee one another and run to Becky and Brad, or what would you call an Asian person? Chinky. This is what we do. We don't understand the damage that we do to ourselves when our black men here in the U.S. and in other regions of the world, those in the diaspora more specifically, when our black men decide that they're going to find themselves a white woman and they run away from the black woman, that's yet another movement that has destroyed us. Likewise with our women, believing that there are no good black men out there, we destroy ourselves. I don't believe for one moment that there's no good black men left. I believe that there are black men that some women would not even consider. That is the problem with us. We don't have the same standards for these other races that we do for each other. A black woman will marry a white guy who doesn't even look up to par, doesn't even have himself established financially, but he looks decent and he's going to give her what she wants, which is a mixed trophy child. It's sad that we are that superficial. We don't I don't see so-called white people, white women or white men going around fantasizing about having a mixed breed child. Now listen, this has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with being against mixed breed or anything, because mixed breed people exist on this planet. They are here because of whatever reason. Their mother and father decided to come together. What I'm trying to establish is the fact that there is a different mindset on both sides. White people, Asian people, people of all these other nations do not fantasize about having mixed children. They just don't. Now, in some cases, if it's a white male or an Asian male or what have you, they're fantasizing about black sex with a black woman. Okay, but they're not sitting back saying, oh, we're going to have some beautiful children, some beautiful mixed breed children. They're not fantasizing about that. They want that sex. And if the child comes as a consequence, oh, so be it. As a matter of fact, in some of these situations, those men try to make sure that a child does not come. They will do their little thing with the woman, and they will not give her a baby. Now, in the case of men who do have mixed breed children with black women, it's still not a case of them fantasizing about having them. It is that woman, the black woman, who is fantasizing about having a mixed breed child, whether it's with a white man, an Asian man, a Latino man, whatever it is. It's that woman that fantasizes about that. Vice versa. A white woman is not fantasizing about having mixed breed children because she loves them so much. As a matter of fact, I've shared many times where even within my family, I had a cousin who had mixed breed children with his white wife. And when she was tired of his black behind, she said, I tell you what, okay, I'm finished with you and you can have the children too. So if it was about the children, why didn't she take her children with her? She didn't take the children with her because she was done with her little rolls in the sack with him. And she said, look, you can take the children too. Now, for some of you, you'll say, you don't know if that's what it was. Okay, keep on living in fantasy world thinking that these people are fantasizing about having our children. A lot of you don't want to hear the obvious truth of what's taking place in this world. There has always been a fantasy to sleep with black people, but there is no love for black people. I remember seeing an old black and white photo, or maybe it wasn't black and white, but it was one of those fuzzy. It definitely wasn't an up-to-date photo. It could have been something from the 80s or possibly the 60s or 70s. I don't know for sure, but I know it was an older photo. Anyway, it was a middle-aged white woman walking around on the continent of Africa. It looked like she had on some safari clothes. Middle-aged, right? She looked like she was in her 50s. But she was holding the hand of this big, tall, African, dark chocolate man. And they were kind of like holding hands walking. As a matter of fact, I think it was more than one African guy in the photo. But in the photo, he was naked. Okay, you know how African people, he looked like he could have possibly been from one of the tribes of Ham. Okay, and he was dressed in tribal clothing. Well, not tribal clothing, but tribal markings on his body. But he didn't have anything on the lower part. Maybe he had a belt or a sash or something around his waist. But I'm going to say, how can I say this? His honker or whatever you want to call it was just sitting right there. And this woman looked like she was floating on cloud 9. Okay. And so I've talked about this many years ago, how these European women will fly their behinds to the islands or to Africa or wherever to get them some black sex. And many times they are married to white men back in the States or back in the UK or wherever it is they are from. They are married to white men, but they go international looking for some black sex. Do you think they're falling in love with these men? No, they are not. I remember there was a case where a black man down in, I don't remember if it was Jamaica, but one of those regions down in South America where there was a black guy who had this white woman who would come in a few times a year. And for the time that she was there, I think it was a week or whatever, or a week or two, he was hers. Meaning, when it's time to go sleep and have sex, hey, you belong to me. And this black man, actually fell in love with her. She called all of the shots in the relationship. And whenever she showed up, it was like, drop everything, you are here for me. And so he just honked her, or whatever it was they did in bed, and gave her pleasure. But then one thing ended up happening as he got a little bit older. She was no longer interested in his black behind. And so she broke it off with him, and she found her a younger island guy. And he cried like an ignorant baby because this middle-aged white woman was no longer interested in his honker, but she came to purchase her another one. Yeah, these men get paid for that. Now, when I talked about this years ago, I got a few people to say, well, these people are poor and these white people, they pay good. So you can't judge everybody on certain things. I mean, if this is the only way you can make money, I actually had people say this when I talked about this many years ago. And I said to myself, our people will stoop to whatever low required to be a part of these people's lives, to get money from these people, to do whatever. And I said to myself, this is ridiculous that even a few people would defend such actions. I'm fully aware of what has taken place around the world, that many regions of the world where black people reside, that these Europeans have pulled the plug on many resources. I understand all of that. But this is why I say we need to fortify and figure out how to help one another. On the flip side of that, they were saying some of the black women in these areas such as Jamaica and Dominican Republic and stuff like that, where these things take place, in Cuba or whatever, they were saying that a lot of the black women feel rejected when these white women come around. One guy even said that black women are like Old Testament women. I find that to be a compliment. He said black women are like Old Testament women, whereas white women are more freaky. That's why Rick James did the song Super Freak. Because he said that she's not the kind that you take home to mama, but she's a super freak. And so a lot of black men went looking for a super freak. Now, originally I was talking about the feminism movement and the MGT0W movement, but then I started to talk about all of the things that are pulling us away from each other. But these movements that have been established by these people, whether it's the feminism movement or the MGT0W movement, they were established by white people or people that are not black. These movements were established by them. We joined in. Also, this pursuing of black sex was established by them, but we've joined in, and now is going both directions now. You have black men pursuing white women straightway like an ox to the slaughter. And you have black women who have completely emptied out their mind as it relates to what they will accept. They will accept a white man who is bottom of the barrel and not even looking in the direction of a black man. If that black man doesn't have money, in some cases, some of these women who pursue these white men wouldn't even look in his direction. And there are black women who don't even desire black men anymore. And not for all of the obvious reasons that people talk about, how black men have done this, that, and the other. But there are literally black women who will not marry a black man that has a job as a garbage man, a janitor, or anything like that. But what you don't realize is men like that working class, blue collar men like that, they might treat you better than even a white collar man would treat you. But because your standards are so high for a black man, it amazes me when we lower our standards for these other races. That literally amazes me. Like when I look at the man that Tyra Banks married, I'm like, man, girl, what was on your mind? Now, some of you don't understand why we talk about interracial anything, because you don't look at the biblical context. I didn't always believe the way that I do. Okay. But one thing that I've always felt for myself is that interracial wasn't for me. I never felt like it was for me. I felt like that was completely just beneath me. Not for any prideful reasons, but simply because I've always loved and desired a black man. You can't get any better than a black man. I don't care what you're talking about. I don't care who you're looking at. I don't care what this white man looks like. I don't care what this Asian man, the Latino man, I don't care what they look like. You can't get better than a black man for me. And it goes beyond looks and sex and things of that nature. It goes beyond that. I can never be best friends with a white man or an Asian man or a Latino man. We're not even on the same page spiritually or naturally. So it just wouldn't flow for me. The man that I married, we are best friends. We care about each other. We love each other. We want to take care of each other. And I just don't feel like a white man or an Asian man or any other man of any other race could ever do that or feel that way for me. Never. Now, it has nothing to do with racism on my part. It's just my desire. And I desire what the Most High desires. There is a biblical reason, many biblical explanations as to why we are supposed to be with one another and not with these other nations. And those are the things that people tend to ignore. I've talked about it plenty of times. We've done many videos on our ministry channel about this, and some of you are simply not interested in the truth. And you want to believe that improving ourselves sometimes means to marry outside of ourselves, when that is one of the biggest lies that have ever been perpetuated. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and cut off this video in a moment. I just wanted to talk about the subject of men going their own way, going after the white man's movement and going far above and beyond what the white man is even doing, almost even taking over the movement. And these white men look at you like you'd have lost your cotton picking mind. And then the black woman and her feminism, in which a lot of black female feminists are actually simply lesbians, women who don't even desire a black man to begin with as a sexual preference. So she jumps all the way into the movement with the white woman for whatever reasons, getting nothing out of the movement, but just jumping right into it. And some of our men are so unfair and so unwise that they think a woman like myself is a feminist. I can't even tell you the number of times that some of our brothers, especially those who claim to be in the truth, many of them have called me a black feminist and don't even know what the heck they're talking about. Just so rotten to the core that if a woman speaks above a whisper, that you will call her a feminist. If a woman doesn't agree with your nonsense, oh, she's got to be a feminist. If a woman don't have to sit off in the corner waiting for her next set of instructions from her husband, oh, she's got to be a feminist. If you have any type of scruples about you, any type of knowledge, any type of voice, anything that you have to say about anything, oh, you've got to be a feminist. Only a weak man can't deal with a strong woman. There is absolutely nothing wrong with women having a voice. And weak men like to taunt the same scriptures. They toss them about as often as they can. Let the women keep silent in the assemblies. That's all they have. For it is a shame for a woman to speak. Most of them don't even, some of these men don't even deal with the New Testament, but they love that passage. And there's not one verse in the Torah or the law that substantiates any of that. But that just goes to show you how we have, as a people, we don't fortify. We actually get worse and worse, go deeper down into the pit as it relates to dealing with one another. And thinking that if we can just join with these other nations, we will be better. If I could just get me a white woman, that's how some of our brothers think. And some of our sisters, if I could just get me a white man or an Asian man or a Latino man, this is how we think. That I can make myself better. How do you think that's going to make you better? By marrying someone who is not even on the same spiritual footing as you. Someone who looks at you like you're beneath them. How is that making yourself better? Anyway, we need to get out of these movements, exit these movements, and figure out what it is we can do to improve ourselves and get out of these pits before we completely destroy ourselves. No longer can we accuse these other races of destroying us, because right now we are doing it from within. We are more about destroying us than they are now. It's like we are giving them a hand up. Hey, come in and destroy. Come in, seek and destroy. Divide us and conquer us. We invite the whole thing, the whole idea of it in. And we think that we are doing something smart. Well, think again. Black man and black woman. If we don't get ourselves together, this is why in the Bible, the Most High said, if I don't shorten the days, no flesh will be saved. No flesh. Talking about the flesh of his people. If he doesn't shorten the days, then no flesh will be saved, because he already knows that we are headed in the wrong direction. So I thank Yah for that passage of scripture. It gives me hope that we won't be wiped out utterly, in which that promise has always been made. But it also shows that our mindset is there. That if he allows us to just continue on like this and he doesn't shorten the days, we will wipe ourselves out. The flesh of Israel will be no more, because we will have whited out our own selves intentionally, because most of our minds are so messed up we can't even see the forest for the trees. Okay, family, I am officially done with this topic for now. At some point, I may revisit it later, but I just wanted to say again, let's stop joining these movements that don't have anything to do with us, but are set in place for them, but we join them to destroy our own selves. With that, I will say shalom.